From the moment Amelie could talk, her parents made sure she knew her place, and it wasn't beside her sister Zola. Zola was the golden child, the one who got everything. Private tutors, expensive clothes, luxury trips, her life looked like a magazine cover. Amelie, on the other hand, was the quiet shadow in the corner, wearing hand-me-downs and invisible smiles. When their father sold part of his construction company, he handed Zola a $6.5 million trust fund like it was a toy. Amelie stood there, her heart pounding, and asked softly, "What about me?" Her mother didn't even blink before saying, "Earn yours. You're not built for wealth." The words stung like fire. Amelie nodded, pretending it didn't hurt, but inside, something shifted. She knew she'd never beg for their love or approval again. That night, while everyone celebrated Zola's new fortune, Amelie sat alone, quietly making a promise to herself. If she was going to earn hers, she'd do it her way, and one day, they'd remember the daughter they tried to erase. She didn't know how or when, but she was certain of one thing: her silence would be temporary, and when she rose, it would be in a way no one could ignore. Amelie never forgot her mother's words, "Earn yours." They echoed in her mind every morning when she woke up before sunrise to head to her first job. She worked long hours at a local cafe, then cleaned offices at night just to afford school fees. Her hands were always tired, her back ached, but her spirit stayed strong. Every paycheck, no matter how small, went into her savings jar. While her sister Zola posted photos from vacations and luxury parties, Amelie was sweeping floors and studying under dim light. People whispered that she was wasting her time, but Amelie kept her head down. She believed that even small steps could lead to big places. After years of hard work, she finally graduated and started a small cleaning business. When she told her parents, they laughed. Her father smirked and said, "You'll never reach Zola's level scrubbing floors." Her mother shook her head, embarrassed. But Amelie didn't argue. She smiled, knowing something they didn't: she was learning from every client she met. She watched how business owners ran their companies, how they treated their workers, and how they built trust. Every house she cleaned, every office she polished, was a lesson. Her business slowly grew. One day, she got a call from a new client, an older man who needed help maintaining his large estate. He was kind and respectful, unlike most wealthy clients. Over tea one afternoon, they started talking. The man asked about her last name, Dlamini, and looked surprised when she said she was Mxolisai Dlamini's daughter. His face changed. "I knew your grandfather," he said quietly. "Chief Dlamini was a good man. But what happened between him and your father, that was a tragedy." Amelie froze. She had heard little about her grandfather. Her parents said he was difficult and best forgotten. But this man's tone was different, filled with sadness and truth. He told her stories about how her grandfather built his fortune from nothing, how he treated workers with respect, and how he dreamed of passing down not just wealth but values. Then his voice dropped. "Your father betrayed him," he said. "He took what wasn't his and pushed his own father out." Amelie sat there stunned, her cleaning gloves still in her lap. Everything she had believed about her family started to crack. The man promised to tell her more if she visited her grandfather herself. That night, Amelie couldn't sleep. She looked around her tiny apartment, thinking about the empire her family lived off, and how it might not have been theirs to begin with. She didn't feel anger this time, only purpose. Maybe her path wasn't small after all. Maybe fate had led her to that house for a reason. As the city lights flickered outside her window, Amelie whispered to herself, "They told me I'd never reach their level. But maybe I'm meant to rise higher, with truth." And that thought lit a fire inside her that no rejection could ever put out. Amelie couldn't stop thinking about what her client had told her. The story about her grandfather kept echoing in her mind. For years, her parents had acted like Chief Dlamini didn't exist. Whenever she asked about him, her mother would snap, "He caused too much trouble." But now, Amelie felt a pull in her heart. She needed to know the truth for herself. So one weekend, she packed a small bag, got on a bus, and traveled hours into the countryside to find the man everyone had forgotten. When she arrived, she found a quiet village surrounded by dry fields and the smell of dust. The locals pointed her to a small house at the edge of the road. The paint was fading, and the garden was overgrown, but the place felt peaceful. Amelie knocked softly on the wooden door. An old man's voice called out, weak but clear, "Come in." When she stepped inside, she saw him, thin, frail, sitting in an old chair with a blanket over his legs. His eyes were dim at first, but when she said, "I'm Amelie, your granddaughter," everything changed. His eyes filled with tears. He reached out his shaking hand and whispered, "You came, child. Not even your father visits." Amelie felt a lump in her throat. She knelt beside him, holding his hand gently. For the next few hours, they talked. He told her stories about when he was young, how he built the Blamini mining empire with his bare hands, how he dreamed of leaving a legacy that helped his people, and how proud he once was of his son, Amelie's father. Then his voice grew heavy. "Your father changed when the money came," he said softly. "He took my shares, forged papers, and pushed me out. I thought he would make me proud, but he betrayed me." Amelie's heart ached. She couldn't believe the man who had always preached about hard work and respect could do such a thing. The chief coughed and continued, "When I tried to fight him, he told everyone I was losing my mind. They believed him. I lost my company, my home, and my family. But I never lost the truth." He looked at Amelie with kind eyes. "You're not like them. I can see it. You came not for money, but for truth." Tears rolled down Amelie's cheeks. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as the forgotten daughter, but as someone who carried something good inside her. They talked until the sun began to set, the sky glowing orange outside the window. As she stood to leave, Chief Blamini held her hand tightly. "Promise me you'll visit again," he said. She nodded. On the bus ride home, Amelie stared out the window, her thoughts spinning. The story her grandfather told her had changed everything. The people she trusted had built their world on lies. But instead of breaking her, it gave her strength. She knew she was meant to uncover the truth, and when she did, nothing would ever be the same again. Amelie kept her promise and visited her grandfather every weekend. The dusty road to his small countryside home began to feel like a road to peace. She would bring him fruit, fresh bread, and sit with him under the big tree outside while he told her stories about the old days, before greed tore the family apart. He often spoke of honesty, of how wealth meant nothing if it wasn't earned with clean hands. His words stayed in her heart. But with each visit, Amelie could see that he was getting weaker. His voice grew softer, his hands colder. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the room filled with golden light, Chief Blamini called her to sit beside him. He looked at her for a long time, tears in his eyes. "You remind me of your grandmother," he said quietly. "Strong but gentle. You listen before you speak. That's rare in this family." Amelie smiled sadly, trying to hold back her tears. Then his tone changed, low and serious. "Child," he said, gripping her hand with surprising strength, "they took what was mine. But the law remembers truth." From a drawer beside his bed, he pulled out a small wooden box. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a sealed envelope with his old signature written across it. He placed it in Amelie's hands. "This," he whispered, "is the original will, and a letter from my lawyer. I hid it before your father could destroy it." Amelie stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. "Grandfather, what is this?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Justice," he said. "Everything I built, the mines, the shares, the land, was meant to go to the descendant who never took from others to rise. That was my wish. Your father tried to bury it, but the truth can't stay hidden forever." Amelie felt her throat tighten. Her hands shook as she held the envelope, realizing how heavy it really was, not because of paper, but because of what it meant. All those years her parents had looked down on her, telling her she wasn't built for wealth, and now the truth was sitting in her hands. She wasn't just the forgotten daughter anymore. She was the rightful heir of the Dlamini legacy, not because of money, but because of her integrity. Chief Dlamini smiled weakly. "Promise me you'll use it wisely," he said. "Rebuild what was lost. Make our name clean again." Amelie nodded through her tears. She leaned forward, hugging him gently. "I promise, grandfather," she whispered. A few weeks later, Chief Dlamini passed away peacefully in his sleep. When Amelie received the call, she sat in silence, clutching the envelope to her chest. The man the world had forgotten had left her more than an inheritance. He had left her truth, courage, and the power to rewrite her family's story. As she looked up at the night sky, she whispered, "I'll make it right." For the first time, she wasn't afraid of her parents or their wealth. She held something stronger, justice. The day of Chief Dlamini's funeral arrived with heavy clouds hanging low over the sky. Amelie wore a simple black dress, quiet and calm as she stood near the front. Her parents arrived in matching designer outfits, faces hidden behind dark sunglasses. Zola followed, holding her phone high, filming her entrance like it was another event to post online. Amelie felt her chest tighten, watching them turn grief into a show. But she stayed silent. She knew something they didn't. After the ceremony, everyone gathered inside the family's large conference hall for what they thought would be a simple reading of the will. Amelie sat at the back while her parents took the front seats, smiling politely at the family lawyer. "Let's not waste time," her father said. "We all know how this will go." The lawyer, an older man with silver hair and tired eyes, nodded slowly and opened a brown folder. The room went quiet as he began to read. "This is the last and valid will of Chief Mandla Dlamini," he said clearly. "All Dlamini properties, businesses, and assets are to be passed to the descendant who never took from others to rise." A whisper spread across the room. Then he continued, "That person is Amelie Dlamini." For a moment, the room froze. You could hear someone's phone drop. Zola's mouth fell open, her phone still recording. Her mother gasped. Her father shot to his feet, his face turning red. "This is impossible," he shouted. "She's lying." That old man was senile. The lawyer didn't flinch. Calmly, he reached into his folder and pulled out a sealed envelope and a flash drive. "The chief anticipated this reaction," he said firmly. "Here are the original signed documents, complete with his fingerprints and a video recording of him reading the statement himself." He pressed play on the video, and the sound of Chief Dlamini's voice filled the hall. Amelie's heart pounded as her grandfather's face appeared on the screen. His voice was weak but steady. "To my family," he said, "I leave everything to the one who stayed honest. The one who never took, even when she had every reason to. My granddaughter, Amelie." Gasps and murmurs filled the room again. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Zola's eyes glistened with tears, for once unable to fake a smile. Her father pointed at the lawyer, still shouting, "You'll regret this. I built that company." The lawyer simply replied, "You built it on stolen ground." Amelie stayed seated, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't need to say a word. Every insult, every rejection, every time they called her weak, it all led to this moment. The truth had spoken for her. As people left the hall whispering, Amelie finally stood. She walked past her parents without looking back. Outside, the wind felt different, lighter, cleaner, as if her grandfather himself was there beside her. She looked up at the gray sky and whispered, "You kept your promise, grandfather. Now it's my turn." Within weeks of the funeral, the news spread like wildfire. Every newspaper headline carried the same story: the Dlamini Empire now belongs to the forgotten daughter. Reporters camped outside the mansion gates, curious about the quiet woman who had inherited everything her family once controlled. Amélie didn't appear in interviews or on camera. She kept to herself, going to the office every morning like she always did, even though the company now bore her name. It was strange to walk into the same building where her father once ruled, the same place he told her she'd never belong, and see employees now standing to greet her. The legal process moved fast. The Dlamini Group, the luxury mansion, the fleet of expensive cars, all transferred into Amélie's name. Zola's $6.5 million trust fund was frozen after investigators discovered it had been secretly funded through stolen company accounts. The very empire that had once laughed at Amélie was crumbling piece by piece, and all she had to do was watch the truth surface. One afternoon, as she sat in her new office, her mother appeared at the door. The woman who once looked untouchable was now pale and trembling. "Amélie," she whispered, eyes filled with tears, "please, your father is losing everything. Can you stop this?" Amélie looked at her for a long moment. She remembered every cold word, every moment she'd been made to feel small. But there was no anger in her voice when she finally replied, "You told me to earn mine." "I did." Her mother broke down crying, but Amélie didn't gloat or celebrate. She just stood and gently said, "I hope one day you understand that what you built on lies can never last." Her mother left silently, her sobs echoing in the hallway. Days later, her father faced the company board, the same men who once bowed to him. Now they spoke to him with stern faces, accusing him of fraud and misuse of funds. They stripped him of his CEO title, and the once proud man walked out of the building he had ruled, humiliated and powerless. Outside, the same cameras that used to chase him for interviews now filmed his downfall. Zola, meanwhile, vanished from social media. Her followers turned on her when the truth came out, and sponsors dropped her one by one. For the first time, the Golden Daughter had nothing to post, nothing to prove. Amélie didn't take joy in their suffering. She spent her days rebuilding the company with fairness and honesty, the way her grandfather dreamed it would be. People began to respect her not just because of her last name, but because of her calm strength. And every night, as she left the office, she would look up at the tall glass building and think about how far she'd come. Her parents once said she wasn't built for wealth, but she had earned something far greater, dignity. Amélie could have used her new power to destroy everyone who had hurt her. No one would have blamed her if she did. But revenge never sat right with her heart. She remembered her grandfather's last words, "Rebuild what was lost. Make our name clean again." Those words became her guide. Instead of chasing luxury or headlines, she focused on change. The Dlamini Group, once known for corruption and greed, slowly turned into a place of fairness and opportunity. Amélie raised workers' salaries, created scholarships for underprivileged students, and built training programs to help young people learn real skills. The same employees who once feared her father now respected her deeply. They called her Miss Amélie, but behind her back, many began calling her something else, the Phoenix of Dlamini. The name spread fast. It meant a woman who rose from the ashes her own family left behind. Newspapers wrote stories about her kindness and leadership. TV hosts called her the rebirth of integrity. For the first time in her life, Amélie was being seen not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman who changed everything. The same society that had once turned away from her now lined up to learn from her. Investors admired her honesty. Young girls saw her as proof that you didn't need privilege to rise, just courage and faith. But even with all the praise, Amélie stayed humble. She didn't move into the mansion her parents lost, she turned it into a children's education center. She didn't buy expensive cars or jewelry, she drove the same small car that had carried her through her hardest years. To her, success wasn't about showing off, it was about doing what was right. One quiet evening, Amélie returned home after a long day at work. The sun had already set, and the city lights shimmered outside her window. As she was sorting through her mail, she noticed a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a short handwritten letter. The handwriting was familiar. Her hands shook as she began to read. Amelie, it began, you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. I'm sorry. You were always stronger than me. I had everything and still felt empty, but you built something real, something even I admire. I wish I had your heart instead of your money. Zola. Amelie sat in silence, tears filling her eyes. She thought of her sister, the girl who once had everything but never found peace. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or bitterness. She whispered softly, I forgive you. That night, Amelie looked up at the stars and smiled. She had rebuilt not just her family's empire, but her own soul. Her story had come full circle, from rejection to redemption, from silence to strength. She was no longer the forgotten daughter. She was the proof that grace can rise even from ruin. Months later, as the evening sun dipped behind the hills, Amelie drove through the neighborhood where her parents once lived. The gates of the Grand Lamini mansion were still there, tall and proud, but everything behind them had changed. The gardens that once bloomed with roses were now dry and brown. The windows were shut tight, curtains drawn, as if the house itself was ashamed. Amelie stopped her car by the gate and sat quietly, her hands resting on the steering wheel. Memories flooded back, her mother's cold eyes, her father's laughter when she was struggling, Zola's perfect world that had once seemed untouchable. She didn't stop out of pride. There was no joy in seeing what had become of them. She stopped to remind herself of the distance between who she was and who she had become. The girl who once walked barefoot in that garden was now a woman who built her own world with honesty and hard work. She stepped out of the car for a moment, looked at the empty mansion, and whispered softly, you told me to earn mine, and I did, with integrity. The wind rustled through the dead leaves as if answering her. Amelie smiled faintly, got back in her car, and drove off, leaving the silence behind. That night, she sat outside her modest home, looking up at the same stars her grandfather once loved. In that stillness, she finally understood, the empire wasn't just hers. It was reborn through truth, through patience, through the kind of strength money could never buy. For the first time, Amelie felt peace. Not the kind that comes from victory, but the kind that comes from becoming everything they said she couldn't be.